Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible, unique webinar, which is our first webinar between England, Canada and India. Today we have three incredible speakers and they're going to be talking about what they dreamt of doing and how they did it. We're going to be talking with, first of all, Abhishek Bhartia, who is the director of Sitaram, Bhartia, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm sure Abhishek will clear that up for us later. And then we're also going to be hearing from Sari Bhartia, who's the general manager, talking about how quality became a game changer at Sitaram, Bhartia. And then finally, we're going to be hearing from an obstetrician, Dr. Rinku Sen Gupta Dar, who is going to talk about how she reduced severely rates in her own practice and unit. And finally, Abhishek's going to summarise to tell us what they learned from their experience. And we're very lucky that the presenters are all very happy to take questions at the end. So please do use all the different ways of asking questions. So you can tweet us at BMJ Quality. You can use the Q&A panel on the WebEx software that you should have integrated into your computer now. Or you can use the chat function. And if you want, you can email us at quality@bmj.com. But I'm afraid we'll only be able to answer those kind of questions on email after the webinar. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Abhishek, who is going to start with some introductions to the concept.
Okay, super. So thanks again and welcome everyone. I thought I'd start out by giving a little introduction to Sitaram Bhartia. I see many of the participants are from Sitaram Bhartia, but many are not. So Sitaram Bhartia Institute is a small non-profit hospital and medical research center located in South Delhi. It was started in the early 80s by my father, who's a businessman, and he had put some money aside to support research. But it took its current form when our first director, Dr. Gopinath, joined us in the mid-80s. Dr. Gopinath was a cardiac surgeon. He was the person who did India's first successful heart bypass surgery. And when he retired as head of the Cardiothoracic Center at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi, which is India's leading teaching hospital, he wanted to study epidemiology of coronary artery disease. And with his arrival at our institute, we became focused on health research. In the early 90s, many of Dr. Gopinath's colleagues at this leading teaching hospital were also retiring. And at that time, Delhi didn't have many private hospitals. And they wanted to come and work with Dr. Gopinath. And with these clinicians came their patients, and with the patients came demand for more clinical services. Also, by the mid-90s, we had moved to a new facility and we had used up most of our endowment to buy land to construct a building. And by now we were realizing that epidemiological research doesn't really have a revenue model. So because of all these reasons, we thought that it would be a good idea if we also expanded into clinical medicine. We took bank loans, we started a few operation theaters and started inpatient facilities. And by 1997, we started functioning as a small community hospital in addition to being a research facility. However, we didn't do as well as we were hoping in our first few years. The bank installments still had to be paid every month, and the financial pressure led to a decimation of all research infrastructure at our hospital. When I arrived in 2000, I would hear all the time that we are very good, and indeed we had some of Delhi's leading doctors working with us. But what confused me was that there was never any measurement of outcomes. There was very little standardization. And whereas on one hand we were fortunate to have many former professors, former heads of departments, deans and directors from this leading teaching hospital in Delhi, each of these senior clinicians wanted things done their way. So like I said, there was no standardization, there was customization around every clinician, no measurement of outcomes. And I really thought that we had gone from being an institution into a nursing home. And what I mean by that is that almost all the competence of the organization was restricted to the senior consultants. Below them, there was a steep drop in competence. So when I got here, I realized that something wasn't right, but I'd never worked in a healthcare organization before. I didn't really know what was not right, but thank God for the internet. I got on the internet and I discovered two sources that helped me. I discovered the Baldrige criteria for healthcare performance excellence, and I discovered the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. While I tried to apply these ideas, I struggled because I was an inexperienced leader. I was very passionate about healthcare, but I'd never led a healthcare organization before. I was in my early 30s. I had to deal with very senior consultants, and the environment was very difficult in the early 2000s because now many corporate hospitals were opening up in Delhi, which meant that we lost some of our consultants. And every year, I had to put in a 30% wage increase because if I didn't do that, I would face the prospect of having empty stations. So you can imagine with more competition, we were losing consultants, which meant our revenue was going down. And because of wage inflation, our costs were going up. This is a very tough time for us. And after about 4 or 5 years of struggling, I realized that I wasn't really being able to make the difference that I had hoped to make. I'd been in my job long enough, so I couldn't blame it on people who had come before me. I couldn't work harder, and I didn't think I was stupid. So I decided that I should probably seek further training. I decided to apply to business school, and in 2008, I, along with my colleague and my wife Saru, both of us went to Boston. I spent 2 years at MIT Sloan School of Management, and during those 2 years, Saru completed the Improvement Advisor Program at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, which is their flagship quality improvement program for healthcare. And when we got back in the summer of 2010, we sort of started a new innings at Sitaram Bhartia Institute. And I'm going to hand over now to Saru to tell the story of how she built the quality department that really became a game changer for her. So over to you, Saru.
Thank you, Abhishek. Before I take you on a quality journey, I'm going to take you back to the year 2003 when I started working in administration and dealt with our corporate clients. These are companies that send us patients. Before working in administration, I worked as a dietitian, wherein patient satisfaction depended on my individual performance. But in this new role, I soon realized that complaints were coming not as a result of my performance, but as a result of breakdown across touch points of the patient journey. For example, excessive wait time in the outpatient departments, housekeeping, F&B problem, delays in discharge, nurse complaints, to name a few. To solve these complaints, I was very reactive in my approach. I would try to prevent these problems from reoccurring by admonishing the manager and staff. Soon I realized that there was no system. To put systems in place, we brought in managers from leading hospitals and leading hotels from Delhi. But despite these changes, nothing changed. In the year 2006 and 2007, despite all the efforts that I made, nothing changed, and I was very disheartened and desperate. I had been successful in my individual capacity as a dietitian and a diabetes educator, but I resented being a failure in this new role. It was around this time that I took my first course with the IHI, the Managing Hospital Operations, and soon after that, Abhishek and I left for Boston. We spent 2 years in Boston, and we returned back to New Delhi to the hospital in 2010. Nothing had changed by then. As we returned, we were again greeted by continuing complaints and breakdowns. Here's a complaint that we got from our long-time patient, just the kind of profile we wanted to cater to. This was sent to us, and we couldn't ignore it. We didn't want to approach this in a traditional way, and that's when I hired my first quality officer. There was no housekeeping manager, unfortunately, at that point of time, so I worked with the supervisors. I created standard work, but all that work that was created was defined by me, and there was limited involvement by the supervisors. I did get initial success, but the results did not hold once I moved on to a new project. The next project that I worked on was the linen management project. This came into being because one of our leading orthopedic surgeons complained to me about a poor quality and availability of linen. He asked me why we couldn't even ensure that the gowns provided to the patients were of the right size. Of course, I had no answer, and I took on to this project. I worked on this project for more than 9 months, created 9 pantries to accommodate all the different kinds of linen that we provided to patients, involved multiple stakeholders, which included nursing, front desk, housekeeping, laundry people, technicians, and trained them all. We created manuals and SOPs. There was a huge investment of time and money, but nothing changed. We didn't succeed. By now, I'd started doubting my capability and also the applicability of this quality improvement methodology at the Institute. Around this time, while I was sitting at my medical director's office, I encountered a doctor who came in with a complaint. She said that patients are struggling to get in appointments because the phones are not being picked up. This became the genesis of my third project. As you see from the slide, this was our first breakthrough. When we started the project, we lost almost 37% of the calls that came to the hospital, which meant more than 1/3 of the patients that were trying to contact the hospital couldn't do so. After making the changes that we required for the improvement, within a quarter, the call drops or the missed calls were reduced to 18%. After the second quarter, we have stabilized the missed calls to 7 to 8%, and we have sustained the gains for the past 2 years. Here are a few pictures, photographs of our telephone exchange staff celebrating success. Here's an email from the staff that came to me mentioning that it was such a beautiful experience to be successful in the job that they were doing. What comes to mind at this point of time when I succeeded was that why did I succeed in this one whereas I failed in the previous 2 miracles? And there were several differences. The first difference was that in the telephone exchange project, I had a department head who owned the project, whereas in the previous project, either I didn't have a department head, like the linen project, or for the other, I did not have a department head who owned it. It was either of the two. The other difference was in the telephone exchange project, we had involved the frontline staff right from the beginning, and we had set expectations. We also involved the frontliners to be part of the solutions. They searched for solutions, they suggested ideas, so we were brainstorming with them. We used technology, and this would provide us day-to-day measurements on missed calls, and these were being shared with staff daily. Besides that, we did not have the complexity of dealing with multiple stakeholders as we were dealing with in the linen project. In this project, we just were working with the telephone exchange staff. After the success of the telephone exchange project, we had some credibility, and I took on another project that was reducing delays in shifting patients. This is to do with shifting patients from the recovery or PACU to the wards. And this happened while I was having lunch with one of my gynecologists. I learned that one of her patients was very unhappy. And she mentioned to me that the patient wasn't unhappy because the surgery didn't go off well. But the patient was unhappy because the patient was shifted an hour later from the recovery to the ward after the orders were being given. I then checked with several other surgeons and realized that this was a frequent complaint. I then, having learned from our mistakes in the previous project, I started working with the frontliners and the anesthesiologists. Frontliners were the ward nurses, the nurses in the recovery, and ward assistants. This is staff that ferries the patients from the recovery to the wards with the nurses. So we worked with them and realized that they were doing a lot of non-value-added activities. We got rid of those non-value-added activities and had this staff focus on the patient care. So Not only this, we also set expectations this time around with the patients. Initially the patients thought that the moment the shifting orders were given, they would be immediately shifted to the ward. This time around, we set the expectations that you will be shifted within a window of 30 minutes once the orders are given. So the patient's expectations were set. As you see from the graph, that in the past since the past 2 years that we've been working on the project, we have been able to sustain gains, and we hope we continue to do so. As of now, this is the portfolio of projects that we've been working on. We've worked on admission and discharge. We've worked on lab turnaround times, and we've been doing fairly well with the compliance. We are more than 90% compliant in that. Patient shifting, we've worked not only for shifting patients from recovery to the ward, but we've also worked with reducing delays for shifting patients from the ward to the theatre. In the theatre, we've done 5S. We've worked with reducing interruptions within the theatre while the surgery is on. We've worked in the labor room with perinatal care. We've automated food and beverage to put together a software to understand our consumption pattern. We're at the moment working on outpatient wait time reduction in our pediatrics and OBGYN OPDs. We've also worked on nurse training with TWI. The last project that I'd like to share with you is the Net Promoter Score. And, we used to have a traditional multi-question feedback form asking patients about the various services that they had received during their stay in the hospital. But now, as of now, we just ask them 2 questions. The first question is, how likely is it that they would recommend our hospital to a friend, colleague, or relative? And the second is, what is the most important reason for the answer that they gave? We then, based on the scoring, we calculate the Net Promoter Score. Promoters are those who give us the highest rating, and research shows that these are the customers who would recommend your service to other people, and they are the most loyal to you. Whereas passive customers are those who might move to other service providers based on convenience, and detractors are the ones who are most likely not going to recommend your service and would not come back to you for service. This is our Net Promoter Score over time, and we have improved it consistently over the past several quarters. We have succeeded in moving patients from the passive to the promoter category. Along with asking for the feedback, we also put together a closed loop process, a system to act on patient feedback. A quality officer goes up to the patients every morning and collects feedback in person. She then puts it online to be viewed by various stakeholders. Twice a day, stakeholders view this feedback and then they take corrective action. This allows us to act quickly and resolve problems while the patients are still in the hospital. So the patients can see that their feedback is taken up seriously. Our NPS is also calculated as a whole, and we also look at our NPS department-wise. Here's an example of nursing. This slide illustrates that how we identified nursing as a top complaint, because when we started in the second quarter of 2013, 1 out of every 4 patients was complaining about nursing, over time, this graph shows you that how we have improved it using closed loop feedback and training. However, we realized in the past 2 quarters, we've not been able to hold the gains. We are looking at it seriously, and we realize that we have to make sure that we hardwire the improvements into the system so that we can be consistent in holding these gains. And before I end, I'd like to close by sharing with you excerpts from a patient's email that we received after implementing the NPS system. This was a patient who was very reluctant to come back to the hospital because she had a very bad experience in the hospital previously. So she only came into the hospital because the doctor insisted upon. and she was here. She was pleasantly surprised by the improvements that she saw, and this is what she had to say. She said that at every stage, the staff explained even simple procedures beforehand, and this is because we are training our nurses and staff on EDIT. She also mentioned how the cleaning staff came in frequently and cleansed the room. She was very happy to see that her feedback was taken in seriously, because she mentioned that she had made a suggestion that the chairs made a noise when dragged, and this was already fixed in a few days when she came in next. She thought that nurses were doing a great job because she did not feel the need of her husband staying with her during the day or at night when she was admitted to the hospital. She was happy with the food and the linen. She also pointed out that the problems she had mentioned last year had been addressed and many more improvements had been made. You know, for me, I think as a quality manager, there could have been no better stamp of credibility. But having said that, I realize that it is very important for us to now hardwire all the improvements that we've made into the system so that we sustain the gains. Because in some of the areas, it is evident, especially in nursing, that we are, the moment our focus is being shifted to other projects, we are intending to lose the game. We are losing the game. So it's time for us to hardwire it and to make sure that we hold these games. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, for a really interesting presentation. I'm now going to be handing over to the first speaker, Rinku, who is just going to be sharing her desktop shortly. In the meantime, we have had a few questions via Twitter. One of the questions is really to Abhishek and well, to both of you really, to Sarah and Abhishek. What do you think were the main ways that you got over kind of barriers to engaging the front line? That's the question that's happened. So how did you talked about engaging the stakeholders, and what did you do to actually get them involved and get them on board with these quality improvement projects?
When we involved the frontliners, it wasn't an easy job. When we had our first session with the frontliners, none of them spoke up. They were very quiet and formal because they were not very clear as to what was going to happen. So we had another meeting with them, and we made it a very informal setup. We had tea, coffee, and generally we just sat down to chat as to what are we going to be doing to solve the problem. There was no blame game. We were making things very clear that it was the system that was at fault, and we are trying to resolve the problems within the system to ensure that we do not have these missed calls. So it wasn't about individuals, it was all about the system. And I think it took them a couple of meetings to realize that we were going to stick with what we were saying. And it was around in the third and the fourth meeting that they started opening up, and they started, giving us suggestions. They were brainstorming with us. So that's what happened.
Okay, thanks very much. I know that we're just waiting for Rinku's presentation to start. I just had another question actually from another presentation, somebody else who's registered. They've asked, could you please explain that NPS again, is what they've asked. So
the Net Promoter Score is a way of measuring customer satisfaction. And the people who tend to give you, so you ask the ultimate question, which is how likely are you to recommend this service to a friend or colleague? And research shows that those people who give you the highest rating, on a 5-point scale, it might be 5, on a 10-point scale, it might be 9 or 10. They are promoters. They're the people who are very satisfied with your service. They speak well about your service to others. They bring new customers. They stay loyal with you. Whereas people who give you more of the lower ratings, they are the ones who are dissatisfied with your service. They might recommend that people don't use your service. The advantage of using the Net Promoter Score was that unlike the earlier feedback system that we used to have, in which we would ask 10, 15 questions, we never used that very well. Whereas with the Net Promoter, the customer has a chance to indicate their overall level of satisfaction with the service and then tell us the most important reason for that rating. So, for example, we discovered that nursing was a leading complaint because even in an open-ended question, people would bring up nursing. And then as we improved our nursing quality, we found our Net Promoter Score rising. So I think that the Net Promoter Score, if you Google it, it's now being used by many leading companies worldwide. It's being used by many NHS hospitals in the UK also. And we found it to be very useful because part of the Net Promoter system is also this closed loop feedback, which allows you to close open issues quickly.
Thank you. Thanks, Abhishek. We have got some more questions, but we'll leave those till the end of the presentation. I'm now going to pass you over to Dr. Rinku Sengupta-Das, who's an obstetrician, who's going to talk about the quality of work she's been doing.
Thank you, Saru, and thank you, Marini, for giving us this opportunity. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine, yeah.
Okay. It's very difficult for me to think about what was the beginning of the journey or maybe where my story starts, because there have been so many highs and lows in this amazing journey. But let me start from the summer of 2010, when I got a call from a patient who happened to be 30 weeks pregnant with one previous cesarean section, who called me up for some medication of gastritis. When she called me up again a couple of hours later with escalation of symptoms, I asked her to come to the hospital immediately. When she finally arrived about 4 hours later, she was in hypotensive shock. Immediate laparotomy revealed a ruptured uterus with involvement of her previous lower segment scar and the bladder. She had acute renal failure and a very stormy post-operative period, and finally recovered in a duration of about 4 to 6 weeks. At the end of it all, she had lost her uterus and, most tragically, even her baby. Placenta accreta, as we all know, is a very dreaded obstetric complication, which is about 5 to 10 times more common with previous cesarean section. And my patient, let me call her Sunita, actually I had done her primary cesarean section about 2 years back for failed induction. She was induced because of personal reasons, not any medical reasons. And in retrospect, I wondered whether I could have actually prevented her cesarean section by refusing to induce her. Well, maybe yes, maybe no. But ultimately, I wondered whether, sometimes even one single cesarean section can make a lot of difference. Every cesarean section that we do matters. Well, from this point onwards, I think my story became our story. I joined this hospital in 2002. The year preceding this, the cesarean section rate was about 79%. And basically, the care was very individualized. It was focused around consultants. There was no standardization, no uniform protocolization of care, and there was no discussion of any outcomes or discussion of any measures, any perinatal measures. And we were as good or as bad as anybody else. The only difference was that our organizational leadership wanted change, and I was recruited to become a part of a unit of full-time staff consultants with a fixed salary and no incentives. We started antenatal classes and clinical meetings, and the cesarean section immediately fell to 40% in the first year. But as most of us became busier, the rate climbed up again to 50% and hovered around that time for a long time. At that point, I did not feel empowered to change anything because I had a small number of patients, and I thought that at that point, systemic changes are going to be very difficult. I was faced with the choice in 2010 when this incident occurred. The choice of going on as usual or taking the initiative to change. But lucky for me, the environment around me had changed by then, and the time seemed to be just right. New clinical leadership motivated the staff obstetricians for meetings and introspection. A new quality department was created at that point to help collect data and provide regular feedback to all the care providers. We had also joined IHI's perinatal improvement community to conceptualize and make a framework for implementation of changes. So what did we do at the ground level? At the ground level, some changes were introduced. Antenatal workshops were revisited. The content of the antenatal classes was revisited. We started playing the traditional role of our mothers and grandmothers in educating our mothers. Some of our very senior consultants participated in these workshops and motivated the mothers for natural delivery. And in the intrapartum period, we held consensus meetings and we held audits. And initially what we tried to do is we made standard criteria for non-progressive labor, for abnormal FHR, for admission guidelines of labor, and we held regular audits and meetings. And some of these meetings were with neonatologists. We discussed each of our cases where perinatal harm occurred, and we tried to see where we could make a change, where we could improve, where we could do better. And one thing that we specially focused on was on our nursing. 1:1 labor support in active labor is something we became very serious about. And we made the nurses' rota flexible so that even if there was a clustering of 3 mothers together, each mother could get a 1:1 labor support in active labor. There were a lot of challenges. There were differences of opinion among consultants, which is natural. And we tried to address this by discussing evidence in meetings, celebrate success, and persisting with change. Each consultant played a very, very crucial role in this endeavor. Slowly and gradually, these package of interventions started showing results. Our elective delivery, non-medical delivery rates prior to 39 weeks almost came down to 0, and we're targeting a level of 0%. These are some of the process measures that we are talking about. The compliance to guidelines for admission in labor is high. We try to make sure that most mothers are admitted in active labor so that unnecessary intervention is avoided. Oxytocin use in spontaneously laboring low-risk first birth women is also coming down, probably because of standardization of non-progressive labor and applying standard guidelines in labor management. And if we look at some of our outcome-based measures, we see that the nulliparous term cephalic cesarean section rate is showing a declining trend. It was quite high when we started in 2011. And this is, of course, one group that we have to specially focus on because this has the highest impact in future deliveries. And this is the group which shows maximum variability between individual to individual, doctor to doctor, and institution to institution. The cesarean rate went down without any measurable increase in perinatal harm. And whatever perinatal harm happened, if we had a baby who had birth asphyxia, we would discuss this in joint meetings with neonatologists and try to see where we could improve, where a change was possible. The total cesarean rate also started showing a decline. We recorded a low of 32% in the last year. And this is one secondary outcome which also seems to be coming down, probably because of leaving mothers in second stage for a longer period of time, and again following standard guidelines for duration of second stage. Before I end, I just want to add here that, this journey is full of challenges. It is an ongoing journey, and every day we are struggling to hold gaze. We are struggling with the problem of very high turnover of nurses. We are struggling with the challenge of group practice in private sector. But what I really want to emphasize on at this point is that As doctors, we need much more than medical skills and technology to bring change. We need the courage to lead change, to be patient, to be resilient in the face of criticism. And I want to tell each participant, each team member, some of you are logged in, I think, today, is that every person matters. Every team member matters to a very large extent. And every cesarean section that we prevent, or for probably the right definition of non-progressive labor, every nurse we train, every mother we motivate for a natural delivery, I think makes a huge culture change, which will finally make this dream of transformative care possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. So fantastic to hear about consultant-led quality improvements. I'm going to hand over to Abhishek to summarise the presentation, and then we will be answering the questions that you've been sending in as well, and passing on the lovely comments you've been sending as well. So over to you, Abhishek.
In my introduction, if you saw my slide, there was a quote which said that if you're dreaming about it, you can do it. I saw this quote in a presentation being made by Dr. Gary Kaplan, who's the CEO of Virginia Mason Medical Center in Seattle. And it really struck a chord with me. I think dreams and inspiration is essential if you're going to take on a substantive challenge. Because when you take up a big challenge, success is not guaranteed, and you sometimes have to persevere through multiple failures. And as you heard our story, for literally 10 years, we were in arrested labor. We were trying, we were pushing, but we weren't getting results. What sustained us through this 10-year period was that dream that, we want to try and build an excellent organization. And so I think it all starts with that dream that you feel passionate about. Dreaming at the top is essential. You must have leadership that wants to create a better future, but it won't go very far unless you also have an organization that is effective, that can support innovation and improvement. And that's where, Saru really came in. I'm reminded of a quote that I read from Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. I read this in 2006. And Jim Collins talks about the fact that it's always first who, then what. He talks about how important it is to have the right people in your organization. I think I told you that I discovered the IHI in early 2000 when I was looking for ways to improve Sitaram Bhartia Institute. Even though I took this idea of IHI to many people in our organization, I didn't find anybody to take up this methodology until Saru took it up in 2007. And I think if she hadn't taken up the IHI methodology, there would be no quality improvement and there would be no webinar today. What's important, I feel now, after 10, 15 years of trying to transform this organization is you need to work with people who spontaneously take up new ideas without too much of pushing. And because it's only when an idea resonates with people's values that they can take that up and they can pour themselves into realizing those ideas. Lastly, I think, you need leadership at the top. You need sort of an operational framework where you have an effective organization. But I think third and very critically, you need engaged frontline clinical leadership. When I started this cesarean project in 2002, for many years I tried just about everything that I could to try and lower cesarean section rates without much success. I myself educated I learned about the evidence base behind maternity care. I shared the IHI improvement methodology with clinicians. I sent our consultants to exemplary centers in India and abroad. I invited external experts to visit us. None of this worked. I tried to become a bully and I tried to intimidate my consultants. That didn't work. I even used financial penalties with our doctors to say, if you breach a certain section rate, you'll take home less income. Even that didn't work. Finally, what worked was that there was a clinician who believed in lowering cesarean section rates for the right reasons. She thought that was the right thing to do as a professional. And she found the right way to do this in our setting. You heard Rinku talk about educating women and their families in the antenatal period, training nurses. What she didn't say is that she would also sit for long hours by the laboring women, because in India we don't have the kind of trained midwives that you have in the West. And here was an example of how a clinician took on the challenge of doing the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. And I think this is crucial if you really want to build a good organization. And this is really what we are trying to do at Sitaram Bhartia. As a non-profit organization, our fundamental purpose is to help improve society. And our endeavor in the years ahead is going to be to do the right thing in the right way for the right reason. So with that, I'd like to stop and open up for questions to all three of us from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Abhishek. That was really interesting, captivating. Thank you for sharing being so honest, actually, about the process you've gone through and the changes that you've made. In fact, that's one of the questions that we've had is from someone who says that congratulations and thank you for your honesty. They said, do you ever encounter clients who are unable to pay the bill for this kind of work, and how do you deal with this challenge?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm not clear.
So somebody has asked the question, has said thank you for your honesty, but they wondered what you do when clients can't fit the bill. Is it difficult to deal with this challenge? How do you get around that in those cases?
Can't pay the bills?
Yes, for the care, for their health care, I presume.
So our hospitals serve middle class and upper middle class patients. They are all fee-paying patients because we don't get much government support. We have to rely on patient care revenues to survive. We usually don't have a problem with patients not being able to pay their bills. A small number of patients, when they have admissions into the neonatal intensive care unit for long periods, do have trouble, and we make concessions for them. But it's not a major problem like in some hospitals elsewhere.
Okay.
What has been challenging for us is to sustain the quality journey through very trying financial times. You know, through the decade of the 2000s, we were losing money just about every year, and we just about survived that decade. That has been very challenging. The last few years, our financial performance is still not great, but at least we've made a small margin, and that's helped us sustain and invest in ourselves and really invest in training for different people in our organization. Because what we are trying to do is not something that you can learn locally. We've had to look overseas for this learning.
Thank you, Abhishek. And that same person has also sent a message to you saying, very well done to your team, and that may your tribe increase. So thank you for that positive comment. We have another question for all three of you. One person has said, I would like to know, why do you think that some improvement processes are sustained over time, while other initiatives like nursing feedback fail to sustain?
You know, what I want to just say, and Saru mentioned this in our presentation, is we are still in the early stages of our quality improvement journey. We've gotten significant results. We are very excited. We are also in some ways proud to get the results that we have gotten. But these results are not hardwired in our system. We still have limited bandwidth for leading quality improvement. When senior leadership attention shifts to a different problem, very often we see that the gains get lost. So I think the second stage now is going to be in the next coming 1 or 2 years, is to say, how do we create capacity for quality improvement leadership at different levels of our organization, and how do we hardwire these changes? All of these things right now are quite individual dependent. They are not completely a system property, but I think that's how change moves. First, there are these early adopters who take on the change. They demonstrate that these changes are indeed possible in our setting with our patients. Then you bring more people on board and you start hardwiring them. So the fact that some of them have remained down while others have moved up, probably that's just by chance.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to add one more thing. Areas that where we've seen that we've sustained gains are areas where automation has helped and where the head of departments have taken a keen interest and they've owned the project. In areas where you do not have a department head or somebody who doesn't believe in what we are doing, I don't think their gains can be sustained. So it's also about the people and the technology.
Thank you. One person has asked whether they can see the list of attendees. I'm sorry, we can't share that information publicly. There's been a comment from somebody which you may be able to comment on as well. He said that recently he was in the Premier Bar. I'm sorry, I'm going to read this out word for word, which you might be able to enlighten us. Recently, he was in the Premier Bar. He visited 5 PHCs, each conducting about 5,000 deliveries per annum. These centres are predominantly managed by ANNs, and with a complication rate between 0.5 to 1%. And he said this is in direct contrast with the urban reports. Do you have any comments about that? I think that's for Rinku.
Yeah, you're talking about maternal complications or?
Well, this is the question from the. If the person who's asked the question wants to expand on that, they can. But they're talking about maternal. I think it's about obstetric complications in deliveries.
Okay, and it seems to be more in the urban sector, is it?
Yeah, he said it's completely different from the urban reports.
Yeah. That is what we also find in most of our studies, that, intervention rates are higher in the urban sector. But then urban sector has a very pluralistic care. Deliveries are happening in small nursing homes also and big institutions also. The kind of infrastructure each institution has also play a part. But what is really important is that we have to reduce our interventions in whatever centers we are working. I think that is where we have to make a change.
Thank you. We've got another. Oh yes, so they've expanded on their comment and said that they've introduced reviewing all their C-sections daily in a multidisciplinary group. Sorry, this is somebody else, but they've introduced reviewing all C-sections daily in a multidisciplinary group within one of their sites in Berks Health, which is in London, and they've reduced the C-section rate from 33% to hovering between 24 to 27%. So that's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
And with regard to that question about Premier Bar, they said that most of these are normal deliveries. Both neonatal and obstetric complication rates are the same, they've said.
Okay, if you're talking about the difference in the rural and urban sector, then definitely there is. But if you talk in the context of India, you see the care is very different in different institutions. I don't know whether we can generalize it like that.
Yeah. And somebody else has commented, I can see Abhishek has answered it, about having professional midwives, specialist midwives. What do you want to say about that, Abhishek?
Sorry, can you, professional midwives, we recognize that without good midwives, we are not going to be able to deliver exemplary maternity care. I think, and India doesn't have midwifery established. So I've been in contact with midwives in the UK for the last 2.5 years. Professor Leslie Page, who's president of the Royal College of Midwives, is on the webinar. And we are hoping to get help from some UK midwives in training nurses. We might not have midwives like in the UK, but we can certainly upskill our nurses so that they can practice midwifery skills better. I think that's essential. To use a doctor as a midwife is using the wrong kind of professional. Doctors are trained to intervene when things go wrong, not support a normal labor. So I think this is a challenge for all of India, not having midwifery established as a profession.
Thank you, Abhishek. And we've got another 3 minutes before the end of the webinar. We've got one more question about patient-reported outcomes. Somebody asked, do you use other patient-reported outcomes to measure your quality improvement initiatives?
Right now, the only patient outcome that we are really using is the feedback from the Net Promoter Score. Patients have an open-ended sort of question that they can respond to. We do want to start a patient and family advisory committee soon, but it's not something that we have done as yet. I think having a patient and family advisory committee will be another very important step in our journey towards providing more patient-centered care.
That's fantastic. I'm just looking to see if we have any more questions. We've had a lot of really positive comments. Thank you very much. So we've had some people saying they've really enjoyed the seminar. It's been an excellent presentation. Well done to your whole team. Congratulations to the whole team for starting something very important in healthcare. Another person said. There's one more comment from a doctor who said they've been involved in the Fernandez Hospital to train nurses in a training midwifery program, and they said the challenge is to ensure that the profession is regulated. Any comments?
No, absolutely. I mean, midwifery is not recognized as an independent profession in India, and that's going to be one of the challenges. How do you innovate? We can't stop for regulation to catch up, but the regulation doesn't make it easy. So I don't have the answers to this. But Dr. Fernandez is really a pioneer in starting midwifery training in her hospital in Hyderabad.
Yeah. Sorry, you need to say something about Rinki or Sitaram?
Yeah, I just wanted to add here that, we have to actually educate our patients also to accept midwifery care in a more dominant way. Like midwives, they usually accept nurses as very, as supportive people, not as people who take decisions. So we have to take our nurses to that level where they can really make a major change in the care, take decisions or help in taking decisions. And then we have to also educate our mothers to understand that midwifery care is also very important. And it is important in its own special way.
Yeah, somebody commented saying that there's a tension between local and national change, which I think that's what you're commenting on, really.
Yeah.
Dr. Azita has been doing a great job, which is transforming care. Somebody has said, another person has said, are there any quality measures taken or considered to ensure that all healthcare professionals are adequately trained about the procedures followed at Sitaram? Do you use quality measures to ensure that all healthcare professionals are trained about the procedures? That was the question.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Somebody has asked whether or not you use any quality measures to ensure that all healthcare professionals are adequately trained about the procedures, these new procedures you've introduced. How do you check their training?
Training in India is very mixed, and it's a huge challenge for all healthcare organizations in India. To give you an example, when we hire nurses, we have to train them how to take blood pressure. We have to train them how to speak in Hindi. And this is a big challenge, but it's a challenge that a small organization like ours has very limited impact on. I think India needs to look at the quality of its nursing and medical education. We are now doing more and more in-house training, but it's the fact that we can't get trained manpower is a big hurdle for us.
Thank you, Abhishek. I've just got one question myself. A lot of our quality improvement reports published in BMJ Quality are published and carried out by junior doctors with the support of their consultant supervisors. Are you doing similar sorts of work with junior doctors to help them lead on quality improvement projects? Is that something you'd consider?
Unfortunately, most of our junior doctors are currently not involved in quality improvement. And I was looking at some of the webinars on the BMJ Quality site, and I would love to get our junior doctors more engaged in this. I also think it represents a little bit of the stage of the organization where we are. I mean, right now, even the leadership team is trying to learn this methodology. It's very new in India still, but I would love to see it now move down into the organization.
Thank you. I've had another comment saying that your gains are impressive and your drive for improvement is even stronger, and we'd agree with that as well here. Somebody's asked whether or not we're going to be sharing the presentation. We have been recording this webinar, and we will be sharing the presentation. Depending on the sound quality, it may just be the slides, but we are filming with Abhishek later on this month, so we will be having a great video interview with the whole team for you to see in the next few weeks. So do watch out on the quality.bmj.com website or on our YouTube channel. Please do continue to tweet at BMJ Quality, and you can find all our presenters on Twitter as well, and I'm sure they'd be very happy to speak to you via Twitter. They love social media, I know that. Do you have any final comments you want to make before we close the presentation down, everyone? Abhishek?
No, I just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity, Marini. It's great to tell our story. I think it's come after many years of hard work and arrested labor. So for all of us at Sitaram Bhartia, it's hugely rejuvenating to know that you're interested in hearing what we have to say, and that's all that I want to say. Thank you again, and thank you to all the attendees who've been very kind with their comments and for the questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Goodbye, all of you. All right, thanks for attending. Bye.
Bye. Bye.